Today's sponsor is Audible.com, who has more than 180,000 audiobooks and spoken word audio products. Get a free audiobook of your choice at www.audibletrial.com/Trending Topics with BB. Hello and welcome to another rousing edition of Trending Topics with BB. I am your humble host, Brooke Brown, hence the BB. First and foremost, before we get into this year review of 2016, I would like to thank everybody who has tuned into this podcast throughout the year based on the episodes I have produced, and I want to thank everybody who will continue to follow this podcast as it develops with more interviews, more soapbox episodes, and who knows what. To continue on this housekeeping little thing I need to get out of the way, if you have not subscribed on iTunes, please do so as soon as you can. If you are a iTunes/iPhone, iOS user, please leave a comment and rating. That would help this podcast be found by many more listeners on the platform. And along those lines, please also, if you are an Android subscriber on Stitcher, TuneIn, or any other podcast platform, please subscribe, share, leave good ratings, and help others find this podcast. I would really appreciate it. Well, I decided to record a year in review after listening to a podcast that I like to listen to's year in review earlier today, but I would like to, the reason I'm recording this is because I would like to thank everybody who has been a guest on this podcast for a great year. When I started this podcast, it was originally a video series, which is why the numbers are, if you have noticed the way I count my episodes, some of them, when it's a podcast, start a little bit later than number one, and the original ones are on my YouTube channel. But I was kind of not knowing the direction of where I wanted to go with this podcast. And then after running it, when actually going to and meeting Adam Ray, I would have to say one of my favorite comedians in the game right now, about a year or two ago when he came to town for some gigs, and his encouragement to keep my podcast going with his offer to be on the podcast, which is still in the works. We're hoping to get that done in 2017. But I decided to keep this going, and it has developed into what it is now. I try to keep updating as many episodes as I can, but I do have a day job and other priorities to take care of that sometimes get in the way of me producing a episode every week. But hopefully in 2017 I can get back to a better rhythm and not leave you hanging in between episodes. So this year started out interesting. I had an invitation to attend a taping of Undateable Live, and I'm pretty sure if you have followed this podcast, you will know that I interviewed Chris Lucy, who was one of the writers for Undateable Live in this year. Actually, I think that might date back to the ending of 2015, but nonetheless, check out that episode if you haven't done so. It was a great episode to learn a little bit more about his journey in Hollywood and writing and live episodes versus scripted episodes. It was a really good episode. Anyway, that trip to go to that taping of Undateable Live had to be canceled last minute due to other life issues and plans, and I ended up going to Marcus Schultz at my local club instead that weekend with a friend of mine that has become close through another tie, which I'll get into later in the episode in a minute. But to continue, that kind of reinvigorated my love for Marcus Schultz and trance music this year. As you may have noticed that later in the year, I got the privilege of interviewing Markus Schulz on this podcast, and I'm not sure he understands the influence he's had on my life and part of my musical journey from the late 90s to now, and also knowing his roots to Arizona, as we spoke about on his episode. So if you have not checked out that episode, please go back and listen to that episode. I highly encourage you to do so. And anyway, it kind of sparked a fire in me to meet other trans family, to go to other events, and I sit here at almost the end of the year, going to end the year seeing him at the same club after seeing him perform at Avalon Hollywood, 11 Hours. I made that. April, he had a Watch the World album release party. I went to EDC, saw him perform at EDC, and some other Watch the World tour stops along the way in the fall, really. So I had the privilege of seeing him many times this year, and each set was different, and that's why I respect him as a DJ, artist, and trance aficionado, really, is that each set, no matter how many times I saw him this year, was different and gave me feels in different ways. And yes, I did say feels instead of feelings, but my point being is it has really invigorated my love for that type of music. Many people think that it's coming back. In my opinion, it never really left. I just had been following other bands and artists previous to this, and it was now a good year to get back into trance music and my love for really electronic dance music as a whole, but trance more specifically. Now, to go back to tie this all in, for those that don't know, I used the band that I followed for about 7 years. I think it was 2008 to the ending, maybe beginning of 2015. Their reunion, really, of New Kids on the Block. Yeah, that's weird considering I just mentioned trance and electronic dancing music, but that's kind of how I found Adam Ray, who I mentioned earlier at the top of the podcast. And the friend that I went to, Markus Schulz, we originally met through being mutual friends of New Kids. So no matter the genre, I have a very eclectic taste. It's been interesting. Which leads me to my segue to, I would like to thank the five members of Straight No Chaser, the a cappella sensation that was discovered on YouTube. If you don't know their story, check it out at sncmusic.com. But I've had the privilege of starting a series of interviews with those members, starting with Walter Chase. Then I interviewed Steve Morgan, Don Nottingham, Randy Stein, and Dave Roberts. Now that series, to finish interviews of the next 5, because there are 10 members, will continue in 2017, so stay tuned for those updates and episodes as you continue to follow this podcast. Now, I would like to thank them for joining me, and I don't want to go back on a tangent, but I do again want to thank the Cold Harbor artists. Cold Harbor being a label started and run by Markus Schulz, who I mentioned I had a very nice year of meeting and getting to speak to on this podcast. I had a chance to interview Monoverse and Mike Fex, as well as Brooke Tomlinson, who's featured on Watch the World with Markus Schulz this year. Those are great episodes. So again, please go back and listen to these episodes if you have yet to check them out. Then, if you have noticed, I have started a series of special episodes called The Soapbox. I get on my soapbox, and that's where I rant and rave about certain topics, mainly because it comes up and I just feel like I need to vent, but I don't really like to vent to, I just feel like it would be good podcast episodes. I started out with Donald Trump and pretty much have continued with that because of, what history has done here as of late. But I've also talked about traffic. I've talked about automated phone systems. I've talked about, side-by-side couples. Yeah, go back and listen to that. You might have the same disdain for side-by-side couple behavior at public restaurants as I do, and many others. So again, I just wanted to kind of do a little check-in recap of the episodes that I've been able to produce this year, 2016, and I'm looking forward to 2017 producing even more content and episodes for you out there to enjoy and discover. And thanks again for tuning in, and see you later.